Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I wanted to do a quick check-in on how I'm doing on my September TBR. I had chosen to read Praise of Folly by Erasmus. This choice was in part inspired by Steve Donahue's tour of his Penguin basement bookshelves and looking at all his Penguin classics. And you can say whatever you want to about Steve Donahue. I really enjoy watching his videos, in part because I love his enthusiasm for books, and his enthusiasm for the Penguin classics really rubbed off on me. If you're going to be inspired by a Steve Donahue video, you might as well read Erasmus. And the other reason why I wanted to read this is that I'm a history teacher, and I just recently kind of mentioned and talked about the beginnings of the Reformation in Northern Renaissance Europe. And I was reminded of Praise of Folly and Erasmus. So I thought Praise of Folly sounded like a good choice. So Erasmus was the author of a number of religious philosophical works. He was widely educated. He read both Greek and Latin. He knew pretty much all the intellectual community in Renaissance Europe, extending all the way to Thomas More in England, and popes and philosophers in Italy. And he pretty much just knew everybody, and he wrote and he translated, and he was very influential on a lot of Northern Renaissance thinking and on the Renaissance in general. Praise of Folly is his best known work, and in some ways maybe it's his best known work because it's maybe not quite so serious, and therefore it's a little bit more accessible. There were parts of the introduction, particularly the parts of the introduction that dealt with the kind of religious philosophical backgrounding of Erasmus and where he got his ideas and what he did believe and what he didn't believe, that in all honesty went over my head. I'm really not a Renaissance Christian philosophical scholar, and so some of that was a little bit deeper than I wanted to get, but the parts about the structure of Praise of Folly itself and the parts about Erasmus himself were very useful and very helpful. And while I didn't understand everything in the religious philosophical section from the introduction, I did pick up some things, what made the work itself easier to read, or easier to understand, I'm sorry. I'm just going to talk about Praise of Folly based on how much I enjoyed it. And the truth of the matter is that the first half of Praise of Folly, probably a little bit more than the first half, I enjoyed immensely. I enjoyed the satire. It was fun. Erasmus is, in this translation, and I don't know how it is in other translations, is a fun, funny writer. And his prose style is really light and really enjoyable. And so when he was talking about satirizing, intellectuals and scholars and political leaders and priests and monks, and all the ideas people had that they thought would save them and keep them from going to hell, I really enjoyed that satire. But as you get further into Praise of Folly, it becomes more of a discussion of the Catholic Church and a satire on the ideas and the people and the leadership of the Catholic Church and of the various groups of Christian philosophers and what they believed and versus what Erasmus believes. And that got a little bit thick and heavy for me, to be honest with you. That part wasn't as easy for me to get through, and it felt like to me the satire kind of falls away, and instead Erasmus is just kind of laying out his list of complaints about the various groups, philosophical Christian groups that he doesn't agree with, and launching a more or less kind of direct attack on those things and those ideas. And while I can appreciate the historical importance of that, it didn't necessarily make for easy reading or light reading. Not that it has to be for me. So my Penguin Classic Edition came with an introduction, which I read. It came with the text of Praise of Folly, and then it came with a letter that Erasmus wrote to Martin van Dorp, who had essentially criticized him for Praise of Folly. And that letter I thought was really amazing. Here you get to see Erasmus writing as Erasmus, not, in the guise of satire being, and in a sense from the point of view of folly, he's writing as Erasmus, defending his work, defending his ideas, and really calling Van Dorp out on why Van Dorp criticized him. And I really think, it was kind of one of the great examples of a letter from a writer to one of his critics. And I really found that fascinating and interesting and historically important. So to kind of sum this up, I enjoyed reading Praise of Folly. And one of the things I enjoyed most about it was thinking, my God, how did this man get away with this? I mean, how does Erasmus avoid being punished by the church or by political figures loyal to the church? He insulted everybody. I made a list of people he mocked. He mocks monks, priests, he mocks the intelligentsia, he mocks indulgences to the church service, the way people behave at church, what people believe is going to happen at church, how people believe their souls are going to be saved. He mocks the Pope, he mocks the cults of people he says are devoted to various saints. I mean, it is impressive to me that he could write this in the time period in which he lived and somehow, manage to escape any kind of serious trouble. And in part, it's because he is such a good satirist that he could always say, that it's satire, it's designed to teach, it's designed to kind of make some things look ridiculous so people rethink them. And I think also his reputation as a scholar and as a Christian scholar probably helped him as well. So the last thing that I really found great about Praise of Folly, and the thing that I think makes it a good book for people to read still today, is how timeless his characterizations of certain kinds of people are and their ridiculous behavior. You can read Erasmus and you can find, echoes of what's going on today in the characterization of princes of the time in which Erasmus lived, which sounds very much like President Trump today. So here's the quote, which I think we can apply to the President of the United States. So Erasmus says, "Picture the prince, such as some of them are today, a man ignorant of the law, well nigh an enemy to his people's advantage while intent on his own personal convenience, a dedicated voluptuary, a hater of learning, freedom, and truth, without a thought for the interests of his country, and measuring everything in terms of his own profit and desires." It's like Erasmus saw President Trump. Of course he didn't. He was merely talking about leaders of his own time period who, unfortunately, President Trump would remind him of today. So, my encouragement would be to read Praise of Folly, to read books that you think might be difficult, and you might not enjoy them, and you might, or you might be surprised. And I have to admit, I was somewhat surprised by Praise of Folly. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you read Praise of Folly in the comments section, and thank you for watching.